restore control of that country to its own people. I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon. Millions of Americans are praying with you for the safety of your loved ones and for the protection of the innocent. For your sacrifice, you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. And you can know that our forces will be coming home as soon as their work is done. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory. My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail. May God bless our country and all who defend her.
The president spoke, the nation listened, and now the nation is reacting. Don Lemon joins us now live from New York's Times Square. And Don, we've already been hearing reaction coming in from all over the world, different countries, some in support, some strongly against this military action that started. Let's localize that reaction, though. What are people saying as far as President Bush's speech that they heard and as far as the start of war?
Well, really, the reaction here in Times Square has been mixed, and of course, the concern was people speaking out against the war. There's been some support, but there's also been some dissent. And the concern was that people may use an airstrike against Baghdad to do some sort of terroristic act here in Times Square, here in New York City. And of course, the mayor of New York and the police commissioner said they would take care of any of that by putting into place what they call Operation Atlas, which they say is the most comprehensive anti-terrorism operation that any city in America has undertaken. Operation Atlas calls for increased patrols in certain areas, increased securities at places of worship, in tourist spots, and also at financial institutions, also increased checkpoints on bridges and other places of entry throughout the city. And joining me now, two of New York City's finest who are both part of the Operation Atlas. You guys normally work in the Bronx, right? We have Officer Vasquez and Officer Maldonado. You normally work in the Bronx, but you're here now doing this. Tell me what you guys are doing tonight. You're in a van, you say?
Right now we're part of COBRA team, which is the Chemical or Biological Response Team. And we're here for omnipresence, and we're going from landmark to landmark and from area to area, making sure everything's all right.
You said if anybody had any concerns about coming to New York City about the safety or about terrorism, they shouldn't be.
Well, the manpower and police and presence of us, it's enormous. There's a lot of manpower down here. I would be safe.
Yeah.
I would feel safe.
Thank you. Officer Maldonado, you said you guys heard about it. You were listening to it where? On the radio?
Yes.
What was your reaction when you heard about the airstrikes?
A little bit surprised it was so soon. I was expecting maybe it was in the next few days. But, you know, I knew it was going to hear about it. It was going to come eventually.
Yeah. So you said you were surprised by that it happened so quickly. Did it put you on a heightened sense of alert or make you a little bit more anxious about doing your job?
You know, it pretty much heard it right after the president spoke. And, you know, I would think, you know, it would have been taking a little more time, but, you know, we're here, we're ready.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why we're out here tonight.
Yeah, it seems like most people were not concerned about any terrorism because Times Square was full today at rush hour. It was full during theater time, and even after the theater, after the president came out, people were watching him on the Jumbotron over there. So it seems like it didn't affect tourism or people going out to enjoy themselves, and that's probably because of you guys. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's our pleasure.
We want to talk about some of the reaction that people had earlier tonight. We talked to some people in Times Square. One woman who was from Manhattan, Kansas. She has a son who is away in the Middle East now fighting, and here's what she had to say.
We all pretty much expected that something would probably come down tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah. What's the reaction of the folks you're with?
Oh, all surprised, all concerned, all with sort of a sense of inevitability. I think everybody knew that we were headed in this direction, and so just concerned now for our troops who are there and for our nation.
And obviously that's a concern from everyone, concerned about the safety of the people there and concerned about the safety of the nation. Of course, you heard the New York City police officer saying that everything is fine here. The mayor saying just yesterday, or just this morning actually, at the White House that in any city in America, in any city in the country, if you're going to be safe, it's going to be in New York City because of the amount of manpower and the precautions that they have taken. Back to you, Bianca.
One quick question. You're talking about the amount of manpower, increased patrols in that area. Anything different than what we might have been seeing before in other heightened states of alert, maybe different kind of equipment that they're now using?
Well, what you see now really in Times Square as well as other tourist attractions throughout the city, you see more police presence. You'll see bomb-sniffing dogs, some of the things they have out now. You'll see members of the National Guard on patrol. Also, these are things that you may not see, and other ways that the police department and the city of New York is helping. What they're doing is they're providing air monitoring systems at street level throughout the city, and also those Cobra teams and those Hammer teams that you heard the police officers talk about. Those are people who are specialists who are trained in chemical, biological, and radiological attacks. And like, as I said, those radiation sensors placed throughout the city. Also, the police officers just telling me just a short while ago that they have radiation sensors in their pagers, so they have it on their persons and also at certain sites throughout the city. So you'll see that, you'll see those bomb-sniffing dogs, and really just an increased police presence.
All right, Don Lemon in Times Square, thank you very much for that report. And Sam, he was just telling us about local reaction, people who were gathered there watching the president's speech, people feeling, you know, the pressure there, increased security in New York City, other major cities around the nation. I think it's interesting to hear the reaction coming in from around the world. Indonesia already saying they fiercely oppose this. The UK coming out and saying that Britain had no involvement in this attack at all. Russia's prime minister saying that he regrets this military action.
There is also word from the top defense official from Great Britain who says it is not long now until there will be a wider attack in Iraq. And as you mentioned, the word is coming out that Great Britain had nothing to do with this initial attack, but we assume, of course, they will be involved in subsequent attacks. And from Indonesia, there is this. Indonesia, by the way, is the world's most populous Muslim nation, and the president of Indonesia has now come out, and they are very strongly opposed to this U.S.-led attack on Iraq, and they now are urging the United Nations to call an emergency meeting. And also we are hearing from Germany.
The same thing
their
today.
parliament wants to get together in a very short period of time here on this Thursday and discuss this. They have strong opposition as well. So we are getting world reaction from all around the globe.
And we will, of course, continue to monitor this, bringing you the very latest. Stay with MSNBC.
Those are the latest pictures that we have from the Gulf region, and that is quite clearly a missile launch that was headed towards Iraq much earlier. It was about 9:30 East Coast time when the bombing began. There was a surprise attack near Baghdad, a bunker. They had a bunker buster bomb that they dropped, a tremendous bomb which was dropped in the skies over Baghdad. Because at the time, U.S. intelligence had indicated that some top Iraqi military officials may have been hunkered down in this bunker. So they decided on a surprise attack. So the war has clearly begun, and now we are in the lull. Military officials and analysts now say that there will be another attack. It very likely will happen within the next hours, and it sounds like, Bianca, it will be a very fierce and awesome attack.
Okay, and let's go and take a look at the latest headlines right now. 90 minutes after the 8 p.m. Eastern deadline to Saddam, bombs, as you saw, fell on Baghdad as the U.S. targeted the Iraqi president and Iraqi leadership. Working on specific intelligence, B-117 bombers dropped bunker busters on a target in Baghdad. No damage assessment as of yet. And now Sky News in London reporting that troops in North Kuwait, they've been instructed to put on gas masks in that area. Short time after the first strike, President Bush addressed the nation saying the bombing had started. He also warned that the conflict with Iraq would be longer and more difficult than some people had predicted. Meanwhile, Iraqis heard from defiant Saddam Hussein. He went on Iraqi television to accuse the U.S. of committing a shameful crime. And he also called on the people of Iraq to draw their sword and confront the invaders. We will, of course, recap the latest headlines in the Iraq crisis for you every 15 minutes at the top of the hour. Sam.
Thanks a lot, Bianca. And while those attacks were being conducted, just one note before we head to Carl Rochelle over at the Pentagon, about 1,000 U.S. troops in southern Afghanistan were conducting raids looking for members of al-Qaeda. This was almost transpiring at about the same time the bombing began in Iraq. So U.S. troops very, very busy all across the globe. Let's head to the Pentagon right now. Carl Rochelle standing by. And Carl, we are presumably in the lull right now, are we not?
Sam, that is the case apparently in the lull now, although I was cautioned that don't rule out any daytime attacks because, of course, you can fire cruise missiles, either air-launched cruise missiles or Tomahawk cruise missiles. In the daytime, they're unmanned, puts no one at risk if they can be seen. Extremely difficult to shoot down. You can see them, but they're very small targets and move at about the speed of an airliner. It uses an air-breathing jet engine to run them in. So some attacks could occur during the daylight. We quite frankly expect there to be a little bit of a lull in between. Sam, also a government source I talked to just a few moments ago confirmed for us that, in fact, here's the way this all came down, the attack. CIA Director George Tenet went to the White House yesterday afternoon and briefed President Bush, told him that they knew where Saddam and some of his top military leaders were, told him that they thought that he would be in this position, in this house in Baghdad for quite some time, and they hurriedly changed a battle plan that had been carefully laid out and carefully orchestrated to add this one particular target in to hit it in Baghdad. Now, we now know that the target was hit with about 3 dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from cruisers, destroyers, and submarines in both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Also, 2 F-117s dropping EGBU 2,000-pound bunker buster, boy, that's a mouthful, bunker buster 2,000-pound bombs. They are guided by global positioning satellite systems. Also, the Tomahawk cruise missiles are guided by the global positioning system also. Now, you saw Saddam Hussein making his speech on Iraqi television after all of this, and I was told by this official that it is likely that they may have missed him, but here was the caution. Don't completely rule it out for a couple of reasons. Number one, this was clearly a tape. There is no reference in Saddam Hussein's address to the events that just happened. Even though there's a dated reference in it, it could clearly have had a date added into it. And you know, they wouldn't rule out a double. They said it probably is Saddam, but note that he was wearing glasses. He doesn't usually wear them. He was reading off of a steno pad, flipping the pages up as he read. He typically works off of a teleprompter, a very slick presentation, and this was not a slick presentation. It was sort of slow and steady. They say don't rule out a body double. They didn't believe that's the case. They believe he likely is still alive, but don't base your decision that he escaped on the tape that you saw on the air of him making the address. So still out there looking, battle damage assessment yet to come when the sky's clear in there and they can get the U-2 spy planes over or take a look down from one of the satellites and get a little closer look at it. But hard to tell exactly. Saddam Hussein is known to have had a number of body doubles, known to have spent the nights in different places, very often during the last war escaped any damage or any harm by staying in private residences instead of staying in his palaces. So that is the way the operation came down, Sam. That's what we're told by a highly placed government source.
Well, and Carl, what some may find a rather cruel and odd twist in all of this is the question now, and we've been asking this question about Osama bin Laden, is he indeed alive? And now after this initial attack and the videotape that we have seen within the past few hours of Saddam Hussein, that question arises again for him. So now we are all debating whether or not Saddam Hussein is alive, whether or not Osama bin Laden is alive. It is rather an interesting twist on this whole story, this whole war, is it not?
It is, and I would suggest to you that it is extremely difficult to pin something like that down. Go back to the operation in Panama and Manuel Noriega and how difficult it was to pin him down. Smaller country, less people, a lot of forces in there, forces that had known that area for years and years. The U.S. had a base in Panama. Still very difficult to pin Noriega down. Extremely difficult to pin Saddam Hussein down. He stays moving from house to house.
Carl, when you describe that visit by George Tenet to the White House a week prior to the bombing, it gives you an indication the level of intelligence, and surprising maybe for many in the United States, the level of intelligence that the U.S. has on the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden. It sounds as if the special ops forces are alive and really kicking with inside Iraq's borders.
They are indeed the Special Operations Forces and some special units that operate with the Central Intelligence Agency. I will tell you from a perspective, at one point many years ago, the CIA, the current head of the CIA at that time, and I believe it was Admiral Stansfield Turner, decided that the way to go with gathering intelligence was to use satellites, overhead imaging, U-2 planes, SR-71s, and that human intelligence was not that valuable. And they found during the Iran hostage-taking that human intelligence was extremely valuable, and they needed to restructure it and recreate it. And the intelligence community has been trying to rebuild that intelligence component for some time. You may see some of this at work here. You may see U.S. operatives operating in that area, but suffice to say that the intelligence operation, the special forces, people like the Black Berets, people like the Delta Force that no one in the military will ever acknowledge exists, but in fact it does, SEAL Team 6, the Special SEAL Team units, they have people all over. They've been in there for some time, and they've been operating for some time covertly. So someone, you're absolutely right, is tracking Saddam Hussein, has a pretty good idea where he is, and actually that may be the indication of whether the person that they thought was Saddam Hussein was in that bunker, escaped alive. Is that same intel that pointed where he was may ultimately be able to tell you that they did or did not get him.
Carl, finally, I want to ask you this, because we all expected to see the shock and awe campaign right off the bat. That clearly did not happen. Is there any indication that A, it will indeed take place, and B, when it might take place?
I think you will see a shock and awe campaign at some point, but one of the characteristics of this is the military is trying to move forward and not telegraph what it's going to do. So all the public information that they leaked out, if you will, about the way this campaign was going to go down, that the first strike would be just a big bang with everything being knocked down, you know, and actually there was part of a plan that was put into effect today. It wasn't just this place in Baghdad they took down. They also hit targets in northern, southern, and western Iraq. They took down some airfield areas. They took down some units that were in there, more radar sites. So a strike was apparently planned for this evening, or last evening, local time here in Washington. That took place, and what they did after CIA Director Tenet briefed President Bush on the possibility of getting Saddam Hussein is that they diverted a couple of resources. They diverted a few Tomahawk cruise missiles and the F-117s, easily redirecting the F-117s, and with the Tomahawk cruise missiles, fairly easy to redirect them now because you program GPS coordinates in them, latitude, longitude of the target, and fire it in that direction. So they reprogrammed and sent them in to hit this particular bungalow in Baghdad to take him down. So something was in the works already, and it wasn't that big splash that we had been looking for.
All right, Carl Rochelle at the Pentagon, thank you very much for getting us up to date. A number of developments to report for you at this hour. Number one, from the State Department, there is another warning that is going out to U.S. citizens here and particularly abroad about the potential for terrorist attacks with regards to this. Also, I wanted to throw this in, Bianca. Pakistan, once again, we know Pakistan has been opposed, but they are reiterating that from Reuters. They do not support this war with Iraq. They are now pushing for peace. And, of course, there has been a call by a number of officials to have another meeting at the United Nations with regards to what is now a war in Iraq.
That is Pakistan's reaction. This just came in from the president of Greece, saying he regrets that this could not have been solved peacefully.
We will see that for the rest of this day, I am sure, more reaction.
And before all of this started, all of the bombing started, there was a warning given to Israel by the United States. Secretary of State Colin Powell telephoned Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon saying that the bombing was going to start. He told him that there was a specific target that was going to be attacked in Baghdad before the more comprehensive attack started. So Israel did have warning of this before it all started. Keith Miller joins us now live from our Tel Aviv bureau. And Keith, we're talking about a place that was hit by 39 Iraqi Scud missiles during the Gulf War. How are the people there preparing this time around?
Well, they're very well prepared, in fact, Bianca. I mean, this country has been gearing up for this particular conflict for, I would say, months. In fact, every person in the country, all 6 million of them, each have their own individual gas mask. They were warned about 24 hours ago to seal rooms within their homes using masking tape and plastic sheeting. And at the same time, they've also set up civil defense units within the, well, I should say, throughout the entire country to deal with any eventuality. At the same time, they've got extraordinary air defenses here, something called the Arrow missile killer, which is an Israeli weapon which intercepts rockets almost above the Earth's atmosphere. That's backed up by American manned Patriot missile batteries. They're located in all the major population centers. So I think many people in Israel probably had a pretty sleepless night last night once they understood that the war had, in fact, gone underway. Nothing here, no air raid sirens, no indication that there was any sort of Scud attack imminent in any way. Today, in fact, the government telling everybody, go about your life as normal. The schools are open. Some children are attending schools, not many. And the ones that are attending school are carrying their own individualized gas masks with them just for precautions. So you have basically a nation very well prepared for any eventuality. At the same time, very nervous. Iraq is not that far away and remains a very critical enemy of Israel. Bianca?
About the everyday person, how he and she is prepared, carrying gas masks around, sadly become a way of life there. And you also talked about this Arrow missile killer system. That's a weapon. What about ground troops? Any reservists called up, prepared just in case?
Well, they had the reservists called up, but not primarily in terms of ground troops, but certainly to aid in any civil defense actions necessary in case of an attack. Also, they called up reservists to man those missile sites, backup crews, if you will, for those as well. But the civil defense units here in Israel, I mean, they've had 50 years of experience. This is an ongoing situation in this country. In fact, if there was any threat to Israel that I would think would be perhaps the most prominent, would be a terrorist attack coming somewhere from Islamic Jihad or Hamas, one of the more radical Islamic groups. They always pose a threat to Israel and have for the last 28 months. More than 700 Israelis killed in suicide bombing attacks from the Islamic groups. So I think probably their biggest concern is in fact a terrorist strike in Israel. Of course, it would be ongoing with the conflict with Israel, but I suspect what you'd have is some sort of declaration that this was for the people of Iraq, somehow piggybacking onto that conflict, a conflict that is ongoing here in Israel.
Keith, if you could discuss this, we saw Israel kind of stay by the sidelines during the '91 war, but this time around they have said they do have the right to retaliate. Could you comment on that?
Well, I think they would always have to say that just to show that they're a sovereign state and that they are not a puppet of the United States. At the same time, I can assure you there is tremendous pressure on the part of the U.S. government to keep Israel out of this conflict. They don't want the world, which as you've just been reporting, which is already predominantly opposed to the American invasion of Iraq. They don't want this to be seen as an American-Israeli alliance against an Arab state. So I think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes pressure on the government here not to react. I will say, however, that if this country is hit with a chemical or biological agent by Iraq, I'm not sure how the United States will try to or will be able to contain the Israeli government from some sort of retaliation. I think at the same time we should remember back in '91, 39 Scud attacks, the Israelis just kind of swallowed it. They kept their mouths shut. They kept their fingers off the buttons. No retaliation in that particular conflict, again, because of American pressure not to give the impression that this is some sort of Israeli-American initiative against an Arab state.
Okay, Keith Miller reporting for us from our NBC Bureau in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much.
Just about 3 hours after the first strike was launched in Baghdad, Saddam Hussein appeared on Iraqi state TV, and he said during his speech, and I quote, "The criminal little Bush has committed a crime against humanity." That was during the speech that we heard, and he attacked, of course, the President of the United States. He said, of course, that Iraq would be victorious. With that, we want to head now to Washington, D.C., and Jessica Yeldon, who joins us right now. And Jessica, I want to tick off a few of the countries. We know Germany, Russia, France, of course, so they've been opposed to this from the get-go. But we're getting word now from a number of countries across the globe responding. China, Pakistan, Indonesia, Greece, just among a few, who are condemning all of this, and some even calling for a special meeting at the United Nations. What does the White House have to do on this day, in addition to running a war, in terms of trying to patch up this situation?
Sam, you hit on the head. For the White House, there is a second battle. Of course, their focus first will be on the war itself and military action. But the president will also have to focus on the fight over public opinion, both at home and abroad. You mentioned all those countries that have denounced this war effort. So first, let's look overseas. Now, the president demonstrated just how severely concerned he is about international opinion in his address to the nation last night. If you take a look at the tape of his address, it was in the first 20 seconds of that speech that he underscored international support. He said that 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of their naval and air bases to help with intelligence, etc. His message here that despite international opposition, the U.S. is not going it alone. Now, you ticked off the list of some of those countries that have already say they fiercely oppose this fight. And the president will have a struggle. He will have to win these countries back over by showing that Saddam Hussein is, in fact, the threat that the president has said he is all along. Specifically, he will have to show that Saddam does have the weapons of mass destruction that the Bush administration has been claiming he has. The president will need that to justify this war. And so that will be a clear priority for U.S. troops if they are able to overtake Baghdad, if and when that happens. Now, that's overseas. Back at home, though, there is another fight for public opinion, a message to the American people. In the lead up to this struggle, there has been an assumption that this will be a quick battle and painless for folks here in the United States. The president tried to lower expectations there, saying the terrain in Iraq is hard and the campaign could be, quote, longer and more difficult than people expect. In other words, don't plan for this to be over by the end of the weekend. The president also reminding people the U.S. presence in Iraq will last well beyond the battle stages. So at the White House, there'll be many calls, and in the days and perhaps weeks ahead, they'll have to maintain a big public relations push throughout Operation Iraqi Freedom to get their message out. Sam?
Well, quite clearly heading into this conflict, of course, the polls were very much in favor of the president and the White House, but time is not on their side. The more time passes in this conflict, of course, they suspect that support will erode. Let's talk about the members of Congress. There are some who are suggesting that no war was officially declared by Congress here. That may be a violation of the Constitution, some may argue. And then there are those in Congress who are a bit critical. Senator Kerry, of course, who intends to run for president, has been critical. Jessica, are you aware of anybody in Congress, any members of Congress who may have been brought on board prior to this? Do you know if the president made any phone calls?
As far as the phone calls go, we understand the only person who actually received a phone call notifying them that the attack was going to happen isn't even a U.S. citizen. It was Prime Minister Tony Blair of Britain. So while many members of the Republican Party have been in close consultation with the president, as far as we know, no specific calls to members of Congress. But the president was required to send a letter to Congress telling them that he planned to attack. And that letter went out. It's dated March 18th. And that was required under the terms of a resolution that Congress passed authorizing this war. And the president said, I'll just read you a bit of it. He said that he's determined that further diplomatic and peaceful means will not adequately protect the national security of the United States. That's his legal justification for this. You can bet this will play large in the presidential elections ahead. Already, 2 Democratic contenders have made statements. Representative Dennis Kucinich denouncing the war, saying that it is not justified, and Senator John Edwards speaking out in support of it. And I'm sure we'll hear much more from various members of Congress in the coming days. Indeed, resolution or no resolution, you can bet constitutional scholars will be arguing this one for years. And you are very right about this, Jessica. This will be a political football come election time. It sure will. Okay, thanks so much for that. It is 19 minutes past the hour. Bianca?
All right, Sam. When we look at these attacks, we've seen them centering near Baghdad, also in the southern part of Iraq. Northern Iraq has been a big area of discussion in recent days, especially with Turkey's involvement in that area, seeing whether or not we could use airspace to enter Iraq through the north. Also, if we could ever get ground troops, more than 62,000 into northern Iraq through Turkey. Preston Mendenhall joins us now from northern Iraq. Preston, what can you tell us of what's going on in that area of Iraq right now?
Bianca, the streets of northern Iraq are largely deserted right now. You might be able to see a bit behind me. The city we're in is about 30 miles from the front line between the Iraqi troops and the Kurdish opposition forces, a front line that has been there for a dozen years, very well established. What we have seen in the last few days, this is a war that the Kurds here, the minority in Iraq that occupy most of northern Iraq, it's a war that they have longed for many years, but also feared at the same time. There have been thousands of them leaving areas controlled by Saddam Hussein's forces and fleeing north to try and put some distance between them and any potential conflict. They also fear, of course, the Kurds, a chemical attack. One happened in 1988, a very well-known one in Halabja, in which 5,000 people were killed in one single attack. There were other similar ones as Saddam Hussein has sought to eliminate the Kurdish opposition over the years. Now, there are some developments here that we had expected once the bombs started falling, but obviously the decision to target Saddam Hussein early in this campaign and then a pause right now has meant that some of the developments we expected not happening right now, but let me go over with you some of the ones that we'll see probably when the brunt of the U.S. air assault and land invasion begins. Notably, based on their Gulf War experience, Kurdish military officials tell us that they would expect tens of thousands potentially of Iraqi soldiers in regular army divisions to surrender when the massive amount of bombs do start falling. That was the experience in 1991. They expect it to happen again. The front line I was describing to you between the Kurds forces and the Iraqi forces is largely manned on the Iraqi side by divisions of the Iraqi army, regular divisions, not the elite Republican Guard, but soldiers. There's a low level of morale. They're demoralized, not well nourished, not well clothed. It still is the spring here and quite cold. There have been reports of some of the Iraqi soldiers trying to get clothes from people who have been leaving Iraq. It's a fairly desperate situation, and for that reason, the Kurds here, the Kurdish military forces, believe that they will see those thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers surrendering once the larger campaign begins. Now, along the front lines, also just across them, rather, is the city of Kirkuk, about 60 miles from where I am. Kirkuk is the oil-rich city in Iraq's north, controlled by Saddam Hussein, but historically a Kurdish city. And it's a city where Kurds have been forced out of for years as part of a campaign by Saddam to Arabize Kirkuk and take control of it for himself and get rid of the Kurdish opposition. We would expect from sources we hear that special forces would go in and take Kirkuk and secure that right away in the next phase of a U.S. mission. Back to you.
Okay, Preston Mendenhall reporting for us from northern Iraq, an area full of Kurdish that have left that area because of fear. They know all too well what can happen, going back to their memories of 1988 when they were attacked by Saddam Hussein. Sam?
Bianca, 3:23 on the East Coast, 12:23 on this Thursday morning on the West Coast, and this just in from NBC's David Bloom. U.S. commanders now say that the real air war has not yet begun. They tell David that the cruise missile strike Wednesday night on the East Coast, and of course was Thursday morning in Baghdad, was just a precursor, preliminary. So again, confirming what we have heard all along from Qatar and, of course, from the Pentagon, that there is much more to come. Let's head now to our Middle East expert, Professor Waleed Faris, who joins us now to talk more about this. Professor Faris says Saddam Hussein, no doubt you saw his speech. Very interesting discussion that took place here just a little bit ago about whether or not this tape is legitimate. And of course, we have talked, you and I remember the discussion about Osama bin Laden's tapes, whether they were legitimate, and now we are entering into this discussion. And I know that this is hypothetical, and maybe it's just something that we do at cocktail parties now. But whether or not this is real and whether or not he is alive after this initial bomb.
Well, with Osama bin Laden, it was where is Waldo? With Saddam Hussein, is he Waldo? That's the question today. Basically, the assumption I go with is he is still alive until proven dead, not the other way around. And Saddam Hussein has also another reason not to accept that a clone would appear. It's ego. He had eliminated so many people from the public scene, so he could take over. So psychologically speaking, I would find it very difficult that he would accept the idea that a clone would take over. He would use those models to protect him on security level, but I would really doubt, psychologically speaking, and I may be wrong, that he would accept that somebody would go and take the lead.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard he's had like 3 or 4 body doubles that he uses very often. Is that true? And you talk a little bit about that. How realistic are they in terms of voice, appearance, so on?
Basically, the body doubles, as they are called, it's not just 3 or 4, they're even more than that, many more. In fact, they are not used for close-ups. It's not somebody who looks exactly like him who could lead meetings or have normal activities very close to camera. These are people who would basically drive or are escorted or are sent as decoys in convoys. Whenever he wants to leave his palace, 3 convoys would leave at the same time, and you have these decoys in these convoys. This is the real reason why he has all these models.
I heard a very interesting interview earlier tonight with General Norman Schwarzkopf, who indicated that at the end of the Gulf War in the early 1990s, that apparently Saddam Hussein had an airplane fueled up and ready to go. He was ready to fly out of that country and go into exile. What do you know about that?
Well, yeah, I've heard the same story. It was confirmed by others as well. Let me put it that way. Saddam Hussein today has a plane, has a train, has a tunnel, has all the connections to exit. This is not someone who would want to really die. He wants to project the idea that he would be a martyr, but at the last minute, what he hopes, some sort of ceasefire. He is surrounded in his palace in a city. It's the model of West Beirut and Arafat, and suddenly the United Nations finally arranged for a ceasefire, and that would be his honorable exit. He's not someone who is really going to go all the way to die for a regime that he has established.
Do you think under any circumstances he would leave that country?
2% when he will see defections in the beginning of the campaign and he gets real advice from his real allies across the Middle East and into Europe and Russia that we're not going to be able to do anything for you. 20% when large segments of Iraq would be freed or liberated in the north and the south, as I said earlier, when he is going to see large Iraqi cities with Iraqi flags, with Iraqi Arab and Muslim and Kurds and others, forming some sort of beginning of a cabinet and criticizing him, calling on the international community, on the United Nations, to basically try Saddam Hussein. This is the nightmare of Saddam Hussein, not shelling, not bombardment. And finally, 80% when he will be surrounded in his palaces, one of his palaces, at this point, he will make arrangements for his allies to basically put some pressure to find an exit for him at that point.
And Professor, I want to touch upon something that you and I talked about 45 minutes ago with regards to that videotape that we saw of his speech earlier, about 2 or 3 hours ago, as a matter of fact. You think this is him, and you think that he is pretty shaken up by this first attack?
Yes. I'm not the great expert in psychology of leaders, but when I look at this picture, first of all, someone said, you know, he doesn't wear glasses. In fact, maybe because now he needs to put his glasses, he basically needs to read. Usually everything is scripted before. This is his voice, Saddam Hussein's voice, and indeed, I can recognize that this is after a shock. I may be wrong, but this is after a shock. And what gave me the impression that it was the case, because this was broadcasted also on Al Jazeera, and after that, there were a number of ministers in his government really, really very upset and emotional, talking about, you know, attack against Saddam Hussein and the crime. You know, when they talk about the crime, they meant, you know, Saddam Hussein to be killed.
One quick question. I don't have a lot of time, but I've read something, and correct me again if I'm wrong about this man. He's a street fighter. He grew up on the streets. He knows how to duke it out a bit. Is that his history?
He's someone who's a survivor. There's always this